Turbo cams. I'm finishing up a video. First of all, yeah, I guess we're live. I'm finishing up a video on turbo stuff. So that should come out maybe tomorrow, maybe as early as tomorrow. But for today, I've gotten a few questions recently about crate motors and why there's such a big disparity in the power ratings of these crate motors relative to other stock ones. And the answer is really pretty simple. But if I get enough of these questions, obviously everybody doesn't watch this. Everybody doesn't watch this channel. That'd be great if we had, even if all of the subscribers watch the channels, then that would be kind of cool. But if we do get a couple of questions, you know that there's more questions out there. There's more people that are wanting to know what the answer is. And the answer is actually fairly simple. And this goes into even the differences when I'm doing testing on stuff, when I run stuff, why there's that difference. And I know I get that sort of comment all the time. If I run a stock 5.3 and it makes 340 or 350 horsepower, people are like, oh, that's a happy dyno because it doesn't make that much. I'm like, no, it does make that much. It 100% does. Yeah, but it's only rated at whatever your number is, 285 or 300 or whatever their factory rating is, just depending on what application it was in and kind of the way that they tuned it. And so you have to go in to explain it to them. So the simple thing for that situation is that, and the guys from the live feed here will know, but the people that are watching this after the live feed, this information really is kind of for you and guys that would be new here. So when the GM or whoever, Ford, Chevy, Dodge, whatever, whenever they rate a motor and they factory rate it, it's not at the wheels, it's at the flywheel. They also rate it the way that it comes in your vehicle. Again, it's not at the wheels, it's a flywheel rating, but when they run it and rate it, they want you to actually get the power output from that motor with everything that thing comes with. And that means the full exhaust, cat back, everything all the way back. It has all of the accessories running. It has the factory tune, which is always very conservative. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to get more power from just tuning it. You know, when guys do a program or whatever, and they add timing to it and take away fuel, like, because that's what you're going to do, and then they get more power from it. It has a fairly conservative factory tune, so that we can all go drive it around on 87 octane. Full accessories, full exhaust, full air inlet system. So the whole inlet system, the mass air meter, the air silencer they have at the air box, all of that stuff is there. They also run it at temperature, 190 to 200 degrees, because that's what it's going to be driving around at. And so they want to make sure that you get, if they say that, hey, this LS3 makes 430 horsepower, whatever, this is what you get. So you'll actually make that much. If you ran that thing on a dyno with all of those things in that dyno cell, that's what you would get. And this goes back to the old gross versus net rating kind of thing. Like, what does it really do? But for modern stuff, that's the way that they rate it. They rate it with all those things on it. They rate it at the flywheel. It's not at the tire. But they rate it with everything the way that it is in your vehicle. This is where when I run something on the dyno, I don't do that. I don't have all of the air intake. In fact, normally I just have an open throttle body. So there's no air intake assembly. There's no mass air meter because I run at speed density. There's no factory air box. I have done some of those tests where we run a factory air box. We ran all of that stuff. Not normally with a mass air meter because I don't usually run the factory electronics either. I always, when I tune it, I try to get the most power that I can out of whatever combination that I'm running. So we do throw the tune on it. I always run it colder. We normally run it with long tube headers. Sometimes I run it with stock exhaust manifolds, but never with or almost never say never, with a complete exhaust with cats and all that stuff. Usually it's just stock exhaust manifolds with a 2.5 inch, extension pipe on it so that the exhaust goes out, that way toward the exit of the dyno cell. Or long tube headers with a collector extension, long tube headers with a collector extension, and mufflers, because the mufflers don't hurt anything. The mufflers that we use are really free flow. So that's a better exhaust already. So when we combine the long tube headers and open exhaust and open air inlet system, no accessories, we don't run AC or power steering or the factory water pump or any of that. We run electric water pump normally. And then with an optimized tune, when you combine all that stuff, it's not surprising that it makes more power that way than the way that the factory does. So that's why when I run something, I run it as a baseline. We'll run it like if we're doing camshaft tests, I run it with a stock cam, and then I run it with whatever other cam I'm going to put in, a low buck truck camshaft, a truck Norris, a hot rod cam, a Texas Speed, or whoever's cam we're going to run. I'll then test that and go, here's what it started with, and here's what it ended with. I'm not concerned with, but people have a hard time getting past the fact that, there's no way that my 300 horsepower rated 5.3 actually makes that much power. Yeah, it does. If you ran it like this is exactly what it would do. I know because I've run dozens of them. So it actually does that. And so we know that that's the case. So now we can talk about how this applies to the crate motor question. So the question I got specifically is, one is on the LS3 versus the 525 horsepower crate motor that they sell. That's basically an LS3 with a cam in it. And then also the L8T, which is a Gen 5 motor, versus the L8P. I don't know if P stands for performance or power or whatever the deal is, but it's a designation. And one of them, in the case of the LS3, that's rated at the factory power output. So 430 or something with the dual exhaust kind of thing, a little bit less with that. And then 525. So you're looking again at about 100 horsepower difference between those two. Same thing with the L8T and the L8P. You're looking at like 400 horsepower versus over 500 horsepower, 520 horsepower. So what's the difference? Well, you might think that, oh, wow, look, GM was able to get, like, let's talk about the LS3 to begin with. Hey, look, GM was able to get another 100 horsepower because GM knows what they're doing. Now, there's no doubt that GM does know what they're doing, because if they wanted to make a race car, and make it go fast and make the LS make lots of power, and that was their design goal, trust me, they would be able to do that. But the difference that they're showing there between the factory one and the 525 horsepower crate motor has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that they tested them differently, like I do when I run it on the dyno. If you run a factory LS3 the way that I do, it doesn't make 430 horsepower. It makes 490 horsepower. So if you have, open headers, open air inlet, and optimized tune and water and a electric water pump and all that stuff, it makes like 490. It doesn't make 430. And so the way that they test these crate motors is they're not taking the crate motor and attaching all of the factory stuff to it and rating it like they do a factory motor. They're rating it like I test it. I don't know exactly what their configuration is, but they're just running it on the dyno, the way that most people run things on the dyno, not with all of the factory OEM stuff. It's not an OEM rated level. So the 525 horsepower in that crate motor is basically just a cammed LS3. It'd be pretty easy to get 30 or 40 horsepower from a camshaft if you ran that thing the way that we run it. So you run the factory LS3 cam, then you put some sort of good cam in here, like they did with this 525, which is I don't know if it's an ASA cam or whatever they put in it. And it's pretty easy to get that kind of power gain. And that's all that they did. So the 525 horsepower is not making 100 more than the factory one. It's making like 35 or 40 or whatever more than the factory one, because all it is they just put a camshaft in it. So it is a cammed LS3. If you took an LS3 and put a cam in it and ran it the way that they ran that, you could make that. In fact, you can make a good bit more than that. We've run LS3 stuff with cams that are more like 560 or 570 with a pretty good size cam, getting up near the only kind of cam that will fit, or as much cam as will fit. You'll be able to make lots of power. And that's what they did. They just put more camshaft in it. Let's face it, the factory LS3 cam, is not that powerful. It wasn't designed to be maximum power kind of thing, because that was not the design criteria when they designed the LS3. They're like, hey, we need this and this and this and this and this and this. And oh yeah, it's really easy to make 430 horsepower. We're going to do it with this cam. It's going to have this idle. It's going to have these emissions. It's going to have all of these things. And it's going to last forever and not wear the springs out. And it's going to do all those things. If we wanted to make more power, here's what we would do. We'll stick this camshaft in it. All the rest of the LS3 is fantastic. It has it has enough displacement, has enough compression, has really good flowing cylinder heads, has a really good intake manifold if you get an intake manifold with it. And all we did was add cam timing, and now it makes a whole bunch more power. The question about the L8T and the L8P, I think is the same situation. I don't think that the L8P, in reading about it, it looks to me like the only thing that they change is the camshaft, because in reading about it, now I haven't looked at one in person and I haven't tested one in person. But looking at the specs, that the difference here of 100 horsepower, they didn't change the. I don't think that they changed the compression. I don't think that they ported the head. I don't think that they changed the intake manifold. I don't think that they've done any of that. I think that all that they did, just like with the LS3 versus the 525, I think that all that they did is they're doing a different rating system because they're testing it on the engine dyno, and then they put a camshaft in it, which is good. I mean, it obviously makes more power, but it makes more power not to the tune of 120 or 20 plus horsepower. It makes what a cam would make on an L8T. And having not tested one of those, I don't know. The thing that I don't really know is I don't know how mild that factory camshaft is. Because if we look at the LS engine family, if we're comparing something to the factory LM7 camshaft, which is very mild, we show big gains. If we're comparing it to an LS3 or even an LS9 camshaft, it's a big camshaft. It's harder to get really big power gains. So I don't know where in the hierarchy the L8T camshaft fits. I'm guessing since it's truck related, that it's going to be more truck-esque in terms of the power output and mildness of cam timing. But I can't swear to that because I haven't ever tested one. But that difference of 120 horsepower definitely is power rating. And so you're not getting an extra 100 horsepower. You're getting whatever the L8T would make if we ran it. And I can get those specs because I think that Brian Tooley has run one of those. I'm sure that the guys at Skog and Dickey and other people have run those factory motors on the engine dyno and just run them stock like we do with headers and their cold and optimized tune and that kind of stuff. And maybe there's even more power to be had from those, being that they're DI motors. We could, adjust the cam timing and stuff and see how much more power that you can get from that. It'd be interesting to see, but it's not going to be 120. And that's just a difference in rating. So I'll see how you guys are doing. And we're going to have a poll today. And for the guys that were here, yesterday I interviewed Terry, Coverman66. I like Terry every time we get together. He's a good guy. He's a car guy. He's real enthusiastic. And so the poll is, should we do more interviews with car guys? Should we do more interview with car guys? Real simple. Talk to Brian Tooley Racing. I think we're going to try to do something on Saturday with Brian. So I want to talk to him about the truck Norris cam for the Gen 5 motor and see about all the testing on that and stuff. So Brian and I always have cool stuff to talk about. So you guys let me know on the poll what we should do. Eric, Jet, Brian, what's going on? Surfer Jag. Wales is in the house. So many cheap turbos out there. What is a decent one for 5.3 to get 700 horsepower? Surfer Jag, wait till this video comes out and you'll get your answer. Just wait like 1 day or 2 days. Where are we hiding the nitrous? Yeah. I like the new GM 6.6 gas motors, 8-speed trans, connected and cruise packages. Yeah, they do have those. Happy dyno shirts. Yeah, I know. My dyno kicks your dyno's butt. Depends on what's done to the engine, but S366 works good. If you don't mind spending more cash, a G40 1150. L8P information. Yeah, that's what we just went over. Today's exciting purchase has been a roof box for our road trip. Working on 8.2 liter boat motor. You don't like it? What is it? Is it a big block? What is it? How many horsepower? All the accessories worth maxed out? I think I did the accessory test. I don't remember adding them up though. T3 turbo Surfer Jag. That's not going to be a T3. It's going to be a T4, and you should run the one that I'm talking about. It will do 800. We did 800 without any problem, and it'll be like super responsive. It's more responsive than that 366 is. What a night to stop in. I'm building an LQ4 with rec port heads. That's a good combination. Let's interview girls in bikinis. I got that part already taken care of. Yes, but no more than 1 or 2 per month. Oh, on the interviews. The other interviews that I have in mind will be much more technically oriented. Like the conversation with Brian is going to be a tech thing. And so if I interview people like Lake Speed or Billy Godbold, those guys, Brian, obviously, that the conversation will be, you know, a bit more technical, and I think more to your guys' liking. Freiberger gave you a shout out for the 44 big block motor and Stubby Bob. Yeah. Yeah. I really like that. That car is super, that truck is super cool. Have you opened up an LSX B15 376? How good are the rods? Is that the weak point? I was under the impression that they run LSA cranks and rods, just forged pistons. I think that they have factory rods in them. We've made a lot of power. We've made 1300 with those. And probably, and I'm certain that they would do more given what we've done on other stuff. But if you're really trying to get after it, I think I would at least put rods in it. But the other things that we do to those is we definitely change the springs. We definitely change the cam. We definitely put head studs on it. Bobby Williams, what's going on? L83 versus deep L8P for crate on a S10 swap. I myself would pick an LS3. I don't think I would pick an L8P only because it's going to be a more difficult swap with direct injection. Doesn't factory rating on a non-crate motor get tested at max horsepower for 1 minute? Doesn't factory rating on a non-crate motor get tested at max horsepower for 1 minute? I don't know what their test procedure is for a factory. Are you talking about an OE, like the original motor, the factory motor? I'm certain that they don't run every motor on the dyno and don't do it for 1 minute. That'd be way too labor intensive. Do you have any rec port intakes for sale on the site? I do. There is one there. There is an Edelbrock single plane intake manifold for a rec port on there. Would a 303 fit on an 86 block with GT40 heads? Or read somewhere it's impossible. I honestly don't know. I've never tried that with those heads on an 86 because that's just a flat top piston. I think I don't think it has any valve reliefs in it, so I don't know what the piston to valve clearance is on that. Trying to build 414 LS3 with HP and torque curve similar to an L8T and use 87 octane. Use 9.8 to 1 pistons, gapless, gas ported. Okay. I haven't never run an L8T. I have no idea what the curve looks like. And if you're trying to run 10 to 1 and run on 87 octane, you're going to be relying on knock sensors to do it. Cheapest way to get a big block, wrecking yard. Easy. Rover's in the house. Everybody, have you on as a background. Finally have decent weather in Ohio. Got to clean the car a bit today. And then it's house cleaning time. About the 8720 cam. That's good. That's a good one. Watching your Sloppy Stage 2 versus the World. Never used it. Now I have the LQ4 and rec ports. I'm worried it may be a bit small. I'm just going in for a truck for fun. I honestly think that you'll like a smaller cam more than you'll like a bigger cam, especially in a truck. And if you're just driving it around, I think that would be a good choice. So head studs, but it's 6 bolts. Does it really need studs? Yeah, I would get something other than the factory bolts. So if you want to get ARP bolts, or we always put studs in it. Nice interview yesterday. Sorry, late to the party. OE motors are guesstimated if VWs or anything to go by. Should I work on my taxes today or begin to pull this small block Ford for the garbage? you want to get rid of the small block Ford? Small block Fords are awesome. What cam do you like running on the B15? It depends on what you're trying to do. We've run B15s with, big roots blowers, and we've run stage 4 BTR, like positive displacement blower cams in them. We did tests where we compared the LSA cam versus the LS9 camshaft. We've run NA cams on it. We've run turbos on it. We've run all kinds of stuff. So depending on what you're doing, the camshaft is always a function of way more what you want the thing to do when it's not in boost. I'm saying one motor to give advertisers horsepower on a window sticker. Yeah, the factory knows exactly what those motors do. And if the LS3 motors are, and I would imagine that they've tested more than one, and I would imagine that they do random checks, assembly line checks, pull one off of the assembly line. And then when they sell the crate motors that were factory, because a lot of the, like an LS3 crate motor is just a factory assembly line motor. It's not, there's not anything special about it. And I can tell you, having run, I'm sure I've run a dozen of those, and every one of them have been, you know, within 1 horsepower, 2 horsepower. They're the same. Mercruiser 8.2 Magnum HO. Okay. Will you be on later? I think so. Yeah. The OEM does an average of 1 minute steady state for their power numbers, but the crate motor doesn't have the full exhaust and accessories like a vehicle. For a kid that's just getting into cars, would you recommend old school carburetor or modern fuel injection to start? I think a carbureted motor will be easy if you've never done any motor at all, rather than starting off with fuel injection. Interview recommendations. Take questions from the chat after some point in the interview or every 10 or 15 minutes. Let's see. Take 5 minutes to scroll through questions like you normally do. Yeah, I agree. That was mostly just, it seemed like it was Terry and I just, you know, going out and having a drink and talking. I don't think that that's the best way to do it. Interviews with Steve Morris and Nelson Racing. Yeah, those guys are definitely on the list. Daniel Powell would be awesome. You guys could duke it out over to. I'm not familiar with Daniel, so I don't know who he is. But there's nobody in the industry that I won't sit and discuss turbo cams with, because trust me, what I'm saying is accurate, and anybody that says that it's not hasn't been doing it for very long. The 8720 will stay. 619 driver carb and distributed to start, and then get a micro squirt to learn EFI. Also, Joe Simpson and Goat Rope. Yeah, Goat Rope. I definitely, and I'm up for anybody that has any cool information. Especially, there's lots of stuff that I don't know, so I'm always up for learning new stuff. Small block Fords that run properly are awesome. I know nothing about that aspect of life. What's going on with your small block, Tim? If you learn to tune carbs, you'll appreciate fuel injection more. Yeah, you have to understand what the motor wants before you can figure out how to make the carburetor or fuel injection give that to the motor. If you don't know what the motor wants, it doesn't matter what you're trying to do. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do with on a carburetor, if you're doing jetting or emulsion tubes or the accelerator pumps or anything. None of that matters if you don't know what the motor wants under different conditions. You have to understand that part of it and then go, oh, it wants a squirter. Well, it's still lean. It needs more squirter, or it needs to run at wide open throttle. It on this turbo motor needs to run 11 to 1 or 11.5 to 1. If you don't know that, it doesn't matter that you know how to give it 12 to 1 or 13 to 1 or 14 to 1. If you don't know what it should have and you give it the wrong thing, it's just going to break. Quick question for anyone. Small block Chevy TBI 350 that I have, 7875 turbo on it, has the timing tab a hole at 12 o'clock that I can't see. I put a harmonic balancer cover on it with all the timing marks. What is it you're trying to find out, Winston? You should TDC the motor, mark TDC on the damper, and then you can put a timing tape on it after that if you don't have a dial back timing light or whatever. One company stand out more than another for what, Alan? Richard has an interview with Goat Rope. Yeah, I was on his thing. For the B15, I'd be running a YSI for a C8 Corvette. Just want to have good power for daily driving, but also want for top speed. If I remember you saying something like centrifugal supercharger. Yeah, you're not gonna. I mean, a YSI is like 1,000 horsepower blower. So are you trying to make all of that? And if you are, if you're gonna run 15 or 20 pounds with it, which yeah, it could get there as long as it's intercooled and stuff and has good gas in it. But I think that I would put a camshaft in it that would optimize power lower in the RPM range, like more of a kind of an NA cam, because the centrifugal blower is going to have a rising boost curve. How about taking a Godzilla? Where should I take it? 4-piston versus drag cartel. Yeah, I follow the 4-piston guys. I don't think I follow the drag cartel guys, but the 4-piston stuff is really nice. I like the Honda stuff. Think you should interview your dogs. Yeah. All you have to do is keep saying squirrel and they'll react. Freiberg gave your channel a shout out. His last video about Stubby Bob. Yeah, I want to do something with Dave and Steve Dulcich. I talked to Brule today on the phone. It's always good to talk to Brule. Regarding your low RPM power. Do you think I should use diesel rods and heavy pistons? Well, you don't have to worry about RPM, right? You should use stuff that's strong enough for the kind of low speed power that you're trying to make. Just finished an L87 LT1 Gen 5 blown 416 stroker 2-year build. That that was real money. Is it all done? Is it running? Dyno stock salvage crate and add intake headers and cam to see what each one of them will produce. Seems that many dyno stock engines then add intake. Bill, I don't know what you're saying. I've done lots and lots of stock motors. And then I've added heads, cam, and intake to lots and lots of those. I have lots of those videos up. Is there a place or website one can go to for a 5.3 LC9 specific upgrades, bulletproofing, and builds for daily drives? I understand it's a vague question. This this channel has an endless amount of 5.3 power upgrades, or all you have to do to make it bulletproof for a daily driver. You need to tell me how much power you want to make. But since we've made 1,500 horsepower with the stock stuff, you can make, obviously, I don't know what power level that you're at. A lot of times with ring gap, you can make a tremendous amount of power. If you really want to do more, again, depending on your power level, if it's 2,000, we got to talk about something else. If it's 1,000 or 600 or something, then we'll talk about something else. But forged rods and forged pistons, head studs, good, MLS head gaskets, all of that stuff is pretty normal. I don't want it to be sluggish down low, so yeah, B15 YSI will be intercooled on E85. Okay. What's your opinion on I-beams versus H-beams? I would decide on whether or not I wanted one or the other of those, probably depending on the power level. I used to help make the drag cartel front covers at CNC shop a year or two ago. I hit the button and cleaned them up after they were finished. Cool. I'm being fastidious. Pal is a cam grinder. He's collabed with Andy, Unity Motorsports, and had a cam and Eric's cam competition. Cool. Thanks for sharing all the knowledge. Noah's maybe want a Chevy more. Currently heavy with 2 parts and with 2-part engines and bad cams. If it's a Gen 3 Hemi, I like those. They can make a lot of power. They have really good heads. They have good intake manifolds, just like the LS. A 468 original vet tri-power, went through the carbs, can't get small flat spot out on the dyno motor at 580 horsepower, change jets, no help. Well, I'd need to know. I'd need to look at some kind of data logging to see where it is and what's going on with the carbs. Is it a transition from a primary into the secondaries? Are the primary carb to the outer carbs? Is it, when is this happening? I'd need to see when it's happening to see what we need to adjust. I'll talk about 1,000 horsepower like we're all benching 225 for reps. It's been a long time since I did that. Did you do a 5.3 with an M90 bolted to it? Yes. Many, many times. But when you know, 1,000 horsepower is a lot, but it's really easy to get. I mean, a 5.3 like that L33 that I have, and a low buck truck camshaft, and our turbo, and injectors obviously will easily go to 1,000 horsepower. One thing about the LS is the push rods are usually worn down on junkyard motors. Yeah, you could check those. I like to check both the push rod tips and then also the cups of the rockers. So if you want to get really sneaky on your junkyard build and you want to optimize your junkyard build, take a look at that stuff. I almost very rarely do I do this because we have so many spare things, having taken apart dozens and dozens of these motors. But if you want to do it right, when you go to the wrecking yard, take the valve covers off, take all the rockers off, look at all the rockers. I guarantee you at least half of them will be all shiny in the cup. Some of them won't be, okay? Look at all the push rods. Are they really shiny? If they're football shaped, throw them away. If they've got a whole bunch of wear on them, which is not uncommon for guys that don't take care of the motors and have low oil pressure and have not changed the oil. That's not uncommon. So go to another motor, get all good. So you have 16 good push rods, and go to as many motors as it takes to get also 16 good unworn rockers, and then put that all on there, and then take that motor up and go, yeah, this is my complete motor. And then you have a good motor. I-beams or H-beams for boost and nitrous, something that will last 1,200 wheel horsepower on a 4x4 truck. Yeah, I don't know what you're doing with the truck, but the stock stuff will do that. A stock Gen 4 rod will do 1,200 wheel horsepower without any problem. I mean, not without any problem, but if you, it'll make that, and we've made hundreds of runs at that power level. So they will do that. And either one of those, an H-beam or an I-beam, will easily do that. And that's like saying, is a tri-Y header better than a 4-into-1 header? That's the I-beam, H-beam thing. You have to look at exact which ones until you get into the very high end stuff, where then an I-beam, I think, probably is a little stronger than an H-beam. But very few people that I've known or met have ever been at a level where that's the thing that they need to worry about. I'm a simple man, and I have no longer have the abilities I used to. Everybody is like that. If replacing a smog motor with a crate motor that still has to pass smog, which crate engine manufacturer do you recommend? I don't know exactly what combination you're talking about. You have to get probably a factory replacement one that you could put in there. They are Gen 3, 2014, 2012 truck and Jeep. Should I use HP tuners to tune the stock ECM or buy some sort of standalone? You can, if they're stock ones and you just want to throw a tune on it, then you can get HP tuners. It's not inexpensive, but it is less expensive than getting a complete standalone, because also you get a complete standalone on those trucks, you're also probably controlling the transmission. So that becomes, also problematic. H-beams look cooler, but I-beams make more sense structurally. Low RPM boost, very high cylinder pressure. Which anti-detonation tactics do you think I should consider? Alcohol, water injection, knock sensors, spark retard. Yeah, you should consider all of those things. BS, did you see the gas engine that I think Cummins did? That they did a super low RPM diesel torque gas engine that they're offering now. If you haven't, take a look at it. It was interesting. I think it was at the PRI show or somewhere that they introduced it, but it's pretty impressive. Stop it now. All the junkyards are going to be open to the elements. I know that is part of a problem, because when guys tear apart stuff, they don't care about anything else. I got my part. I don't care about all of the rest of the motor. Now can fill with water. The nice thing about the yards that we go to is the hoods are normally closed on them. So if it rains and stuff, at least it doesn't fill the motors up. Is the L99 and the Gen 5 Camaro worth putting money into for a drag and drive car? Will the powertrain or rear end hold up to a power adder to get in the mid or low 10s or switch platforms? No, a Gen 5 Camaro is good. It's just heavy. I mean, you could get in the low 10s with a Fox body Mustang a lot easier with a lot less power than you can with a Gen 5 Camaro, but you can make lots of power with that. So when does one need an I-beam? I don't know. I don't know what that number is. I don't think that there is an absolute number that anybody could tell you. Love the life you with Terry. Yeah, Terry's good people. Forged rods and pistons look like candy when they're new in the box. It's a shame we have to take them out. I know I feel that way, Tim, about a lot of stuff. Like ported heads are like that too. If they're CNC ported heads, I'm like, yeah, these are way too nice. I don't even want to put them on and get them all dirty now. Saws a IS-15 Cummins. That it is pretty cool. Did I see the gas engine Cummins PRI show? I'll search it. Yeah, take a look. Factory ECM is definitely the better option for so many reasons, but they're very difficult to get into and dial them in. You should call SCAT. They'll tell you what rod you need to meet your needs. The problem is that the forged rod guys are going to tell you that you need forged rods, above 400 horsepower, 500 horsepower. They rate their rods just like we were talking about this rating for the crate motors and stuff. They rate their rods at a way more conservative level than, like, they rate their factory, their forged rods lower than we have run the factory rods. And not just run them once. I'm not talking about one pass where we made 1,500 horsepower. I'm talking about we have 100 passes at 1,000 horsepower. So you'd think that the forged rod would be way above that. But I don't know how many passes they're rating that at. So if they rate a forged rod at, let's say it's 700 horsepower, does that mean they can make 700 horsepower like sustain for 24 hours or 700 horsepower for 100,000 cycles? Or I don't know what the rating is. It's not an absolute rating, because we know that if a factory powdered metal rod can do 1,500 and 1,300 foot-pounds and still survive, then we know that a forged rod will be a lot more than that. Going at a 77 GM, I know BP has smog compatible small blocks. I just don't know. Let's see. Didn't know anything else made anything that would be a good starting point. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I think that if you put anything in there that's still stock heads and stock camshaft is going to be really the big thing. Stock compression and stuff, that I think that you have all of your factory smog stuff on there, I think it will be fine. Non-ethanol gas is getting into my state of Maine. Making 8 PSI at 2,500 and I still pull timing. Yeah, you're definitely going to have the motor is going to want less timing down at that RPM range than it does at higher RPM ranges. I mean, if that's the way any engine is. That's the way an NA engine is. That's the way a boosted engine. That's the way any motor is. It wants more timing the higher the engine speed is. And so at low speed, it needs less timing. You don't have to advance it quite as far to have the optimum cylinder expansion occur where it's going to be most productive. And then you got to take away more, because under pressure, and you got to take away more according to whatever the detonation threshold is. How often you stream? You can interview all kinds of guys with builds, and guys on here you can ask them questions about their build. Yeah, no, I agree, Rob. I think that doing viewers and stuff would also be cool, because it doesn't just have to be like industry titans or experts or whatever. Factory ECMs have lots of tables, limits, so take quite a while to figure out. I agree. Factory computers, the interdependency of all of these things in the factory ECU is hard for a lot of guys to figure out. And not hard, it just takes a long time for them to get the experience of all of these things that they had to modify. Oh yeah, this was adjusting this and this and this and this. Like, no, just give me one table. Just this. I don't want modifiers. I want all the modifiers turned off. But the modifier should be on for temperature and all that. Isn't the clamping force of the bolts more important at common power levels than L versus H debate? Well, that's a whole different thing. The clamping force of the bolts, like bolt stretch and things, becomes more of a function at engine speeds, not loads. The clamping force of the bolt is not really going to come into play until you're doing a stretch. So you're doing a snatch load, which is RPM. Would a SCAT crank fit in a 5.7 Hemi? I've never looked to see if SCAT makes a crank for a 5.7 Hemi. I think that they do. I think that we've run one of their stroker ones, but I don't know if they run are you talking about a factory one, like a factory stroke? Factory ECUs make sense when you need math and factory emissions, otherwise go Holly. Meanwhile, a girl answering the phone at Titan Motorsports told me their 4340 Forge rod for an LS would only hold 400 horsepower. Maybe she means 400 horsepower each for each rod. Just watched your 8.1 big block video. I want to swap one into a square body. Should I stroke it? I don't think you need to. Maybe a turbo is going to give you more than enough power more than you want to run. Use it for towing. Yeah. Mike Davis, viewer here, and the guy that gave me the 6-liter that we ran, he has a turbo 8.1 in his 3500 dually, and he has a turbo on it, and it has 650,000 miles on it. So it works really good. And it makes it, if you just add a turbo to that motor, even a stock one, it makes a lot of torque. So you can, if you want 700 or 800 foot-pounds of torque, you can certainly do that. I don't know about rock crawling. So I was looking at SCAT's forged I-beams under Summit's brand, but they are SCAT's forged I-beams, which rated 700 horsepower, and Summit H-beam 1200 horsepower rating. Yeah, I don't know what two those are, so I don't know what the difference is. Well, Brian, again, what power output are you trying to achieve? What cam duration, intake, and exhaust would you consider aggressive for a 408? Well, I would consider the aggressive cam to be aggressive if it had idle characteristics that whoever had that cam didn't like. So it doesn't matter like a number, because some people don't want, they don't want anything but stock. And so even a 208 or a 210 cam, no, that's too lumpy for me. That's a subjective thing. I just want to know, that's why I test so many cams on the 408s and all the motors, so that you get to pick whatever kind of power curve you want. And then, again, I have a stock cam in mind. So if that tells you anything. Let's look at my log file. I'm making 1 PSI at 1700, 5 PSI at 2000. Okay. I was looking at because I'm doing the editing on the turbo video for the 5.3, and we have boost at, let's see. As we're rolling in, we have boost at 22% TPS. So way before we're even at wide open throttle. And we have full boost at 34% TPS. So even before we get to wide open throttle, we have all the boost in this turbo. So it loads up pretty good. That's true, but I just meant as a structural design for use, or that I've always heard I-beams design is typically more durable and H-beams offer strength and weight savings and less durable. Yeah, I don't know about that argument. I read a thing a few years back about a Mercury Marine new motor, twin turbo, twin supercharged, big block, 27 horsepower. Final test was pin the throttle wide open and walk away for 30 days. And walk away for 30 days. That's a myth. At 2,700 horsepower, how are they going to keep fuel going to it? How are they going to keep the temperature down on it? If you want to interview me, I'm great for creative. let's see, first the engine. The rods have to be rated conservatively for the guy who lives in Knox City. Yeah. That's like the tunes too. Scrolling. Looks like the Cummins octane motor is being made in North Carolina. Okay, did you read about it? It's making good low-speed power. Do an interview with the airboat guys. Yeah, no, that would be cool. I just want to take a ride in one of those. I want to go for a airboat ride in the swamps. Mostly because I just want to go try to find pythons. 99.3 octane is 4 to 425 a gallon. Playing with HP tuners now. It's definitely a task. We need to interview Ford CEO. Richard, do you have any tuning time on Holley's new 6L80 integration? No, I've never done any tuning in the vehicle, and nothing ever in on a transmission. Yeah, everything has a learning curve. If you're, I mean, I didn't know how to work any of the ECUs until I had, smart people like Eric and Ish and Ernie and Tom to show me how to do it. I mean, I knew what the motor needed. They just showed me how to give it that. The big lever on stock ECMs is understanding that they're very integrated and layered. Precision and accurate data is important. Yep. We'll be down testing your truck plus cam on a Turbo 5.3. Okay. We just ran both of those on the 6.0 that we ran. Do you have thoughts on strengthening aluminum threads by enlarging the hole and using helicoils? Do you think that helicoils are going to be stronger than they would be on just threading the block? A lot of people tell me more octane does not make a difference, but I beg to differ, especially in two strokes. Octane doesn't change power output unless on a typical 4-stroke gas engine. We've tested that a lot. If you have a motor that you can run cold enough to run all the timing in on 91, and then you put 100, as long as the 100 is not oxygenated, because the oxygenated part can change the power. But if you put 110 or 112 or 114 or 118 or whatever, it didn't change the power at all. But if you can then go up in timing, and the combustion chamber design will respond to more timing, you can make power like that, but not the fuel itself. Now, the difference is on oxygenated fuels, like some of the 100 stuff is oxygenated, and then E85 sometimes. I'm having a little issue when it comes to preload for my 5.3. What's the issue? You ever tested turbos mounted after a set of long tube headers, remote style? Yeah, look up the video with the remote turbos on it. And just recently, I did an interesting test where we did the single-sided turbo on a V8, and we compared it 2 different ways. One with a long tube header, longish tube header, the one that we run on all the Big Bang stuff, and then a much tighter log style manifold. Question: if I purchase a balanced rotating assembly from Texas Speed, since it's balanced, I don't need to take it to my machinist to get it balanced on the block. No, the block has nothing to do with the balancing. The balancing is just the rotating assembly. So if it comes balanced from them, if the crank rods, pistons, and normally we do bearings and oil and rings, all of that is together as part of the rotating assembly, and then we balance that, and then you can put it in any block as long as the block is machined to accept that, all of that stuff. If you look at Summit Pro LS rods, they have the same markings, bags, and outer box as K1. I'm curious where the made in the USA part comes in and what percentage of it. I don't know. The K1 stuff is good. Can I send the block to get cleaned and gone over, replace all bearings and just assemble it in my garage? Yeah, that's very easy. As long as the block is set up for, long as the bore size is right for your piston, and it has to have the right piston to wall clearance for whatever kind of material you have in that piston. Whoever did the pistons on those is going to say, hey, this piston needs 3,000 piston to wall, or 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever the number is. Just make sure when they're boring the block that they do that, and then you surface the block to have the right kind of finish for, like we do it for MLS gaskets. And then most of the time the mains don't need to have anything done to them, but you just need to make sure that and then you need to check it. You need to check the and the machine shop might be able to do that. They might be able to mic the crank and then tell you what your bearing clearance is on the mains and the rods. I want to run 800 to 1,000 mil horsepower. That's easy on boost. Only if the occasion requires it. I'd spray 100 shot or more. And I don't want to use Gen 4 rods. Okay, so pick any aftermarket, like pick a Pro or the Summit Pro LS stuff, and you're fine. Nothing that you're doing is like the power level that you're doing. Lots of guys are doing that on stock stuff. So with ring gap on Gen 3 stuff even, but certainly on Gen 4 stuff. And if you want to put aftermarket rods in it, you don't have to concern yourself with whether to use a H-beam or I-beam, because you're not there. You're not in an area where that's a concern. Just get some sort of affordable aftermarket forged rod, and the rod will never break at that power level. You have to hurt something else to break that rod. How much power can Decus make on E85? Less than 1,000. If you use a stroker crank, would you have to change the connecting rods? Yes. The crank and the rod and the piston compression height on the pin all have to work for whatever the deck height of the block is. Sure, they monitor. Supposedly that's what they did. Don't remember what magazine that was in. Yeah, 30 days at wide open throttle is not anything that I've ever heard of. I remember the stories of guys running it 24 hours or whatever, running it overnight and doing it. They don't usually load it at 1 RPM, even for endurance stuff. When they do endurance stuff, most of the time what they'll do is run it they'll cycle it from peak torque to peak horsepower. They'll cycle it back and forth through that. But that sounds like an internet myth to me. Come to Texas, I got an LS and airboat down here. That would be cool. But do you have swamps with Burmese pythons in there? I don't think they've gotten up to Texas yet. Richard, in your experience, have you come across a root supercharger for a Pontiac 400 that will fit under the hood? I don't want to cut a hole. Yeah, not a root style supercharger. I mean, I think you probably could get one of the you'd have to make the. No, the answer is no. I don't know that anybody has that. Because I don't know how much hood clearance you have. I think you could do that possibly with if one of the blower manufacturers like Blower Shop or one of those good guys has a Pontiac blower intake manifold, and then you might be able to put one of the smaller M112s or 122s and run that, and that might work. You'd have to run it fuel injected, or a carburetor going into the back of it. But otherwise, I don't know. Figured I would ask about the 6L80 stuff. A machine shop would still need the rotating assembly to check clearances in the block. Yeah, they'd have to measure the bearings. I mean, you have to measure both the bearings in the block, and then you'd have to measure the main and the rod journals. Cummins have always been higher torque motors compared to the competition. They love small turbos and torque. One in an Envoy with the 427 LS and 6L80 is my daily, so I'm trying to get it dialed in. Yeah, I've never done any transmission tuning at all. All heel coils are not created equal. How much timing does a 5-liter like? All of the ones that we ran were 34, 35 degrees at the horsepower peak. That's kind of where those heads seem to like it. Crank from a 6.4-liter SCAT pack Oh, I thought you meant SCAT, the manufacturer. Is it likely to fit in a 5 semi heavy? I thought they were slightly longer stroke. A 6.4 definitely is a longer stroke, but the crank will work. I don't know for sure. I think that the crank itself will bolt in. A 6.4 is going to be a later motor, so you might need a later block. I don't know if they changed that at all, but the crank will fit. But what you need are rods and pistons that are the right length on the rod and then the right compression height on the piston to make it work in that 5.7. And it might be that you can use, and I don't know why you would do this, but you could use the 6.4 crank and rod and piston, take off that piston, put a 5.7 piston on it. Well, I don't know that would work. I don't know that they have the same compression height. Summit Racing, Chevy Ellis connecting rod. There's rods I'm looking at. I-beams are pretty cheap. They're SCAT rods just under Summit brand. Yeah, those are fine. Those are stronger than your power level is going to need. My aluminum Edelbrock heads came with heel coils on the exhaust bolt holes. Okay. Aldo, I do all my stuff in California. Not all of it, but that's where I am. The stock diameter ARP main set is longer than the aluminum threads in the block. By using the large OD helicoil with the same ARP stud, the larger helicoil OD should be stronger. Do you think that thread engagement is a problem? I mean, we've talked about that. Just making it better, because you can make it better. But if it's already 5 times as good as it needs to be, making it 6 times as good as it needs to be doesn't really gain you anything. It would be nice if pump E85 was actually E85. Yeah, I don't worry about that. For the stuff that we're doing, whatever the E number is after that works fine. Also, a machine shop would assemble the rods and pistons if not assembled already according to each rod and piston weight. The piston and the rods should all be the same. The pistons should all be the same or really close. Do you believe lackluster Mustang sales from last year were more from the styling or their outrageous cost of a sports car? I don't know. I didn't know that they had lackluster sales, so I don't know anything about that. We'll let go on the Sentra. I'm betting the head gasket will let go. 7,000 RPM, 17 pounds, 18 degrees of timing, 0.85, E85. It's going to be fun. Are you taking it to the track, Sentra? K1 stuff is really good. Did 900 plus for 3 years and Turbo Avalanche as a daily. Yeah, I've never seen. I mean, we've bent production rods and stuff. And I'm surprised if they bent, given that they were powdered metal rods and that they didn't just destroy themselves. But we did that because we were doing dumb stuff, though, not from power. Saw your video explaining preload and preload. However, is it just measuring how long we push rod and that's it? And making sure when you torque it that it's half a turn or full turn? Yes. What you're doing is the length of push rod that you use will determine how far you're pushing down the lifter, how much preload you're putting on the lifter. That's what pushing it down means. And the length of the push rod determines that. And the way that I measure it is once we get to 0 lash, now you have to bottom out your rocker down into the rocker cup. And then that's what's going to push the push rod down. So as you're tightening that down until you bottom it out all the way, I just count the number of turns. Half turn's fine, full turn's fine. Turn and a half can also be fine. I don't go more than that range though. E85 is trash gas and goes bad from sitting for 30 to 80 days. I don't ever let stuff sit for 80 days. And I think E85 is one of the best things in the world. I think it's $2 or $3 race gas, that's nothing but good. I bought the K1 rods and Summit Pro Plus rods were on the back order for 4 months. Our local machine shop guy is retiring. E85 makes power under boost. It sure does. Swamp's not that far from me. Louisiana bayous are a short drive away. Louisiana's also not going to have any gator. I mean, they're going to have gators, but they won't have any. They won't have pythons though. I don't think pythons are up that high yet. That's why we want to. I mean, I would always take a ride in a swamp boat. I think that would be awesome. But we're planning another trip to go down into the Everglades. You're assuming a helicoil is stronger than a thick casting or ARP bolt. I don't know if I'd trust that. Just drained 5 gallons of gas from a sled that had been sitting for 7 years. Gas was dark, yellow, almost brown in color. Yeah, 7 years and gas, that's not good. That's not a good thing. We'd run some, let's see here. We'd run some on the dyno for a few hours, never overnight though. Yeah, Dan, they did some endurance stuff with the guys from Turnkey at WestTech. But running a motor for like hours on end, it's nerve-wracking. Did you hear about the 67-pound goldfish caught in one of the Great Lakes? I saw a thing on social media about that, but I didn't know if it was real. What's your opinion on aluminum 5.3 sleeved to 427? We've done sleeved. I did a sleeved LS6 block that we made a 468 out of, and it worked good. It was a Darton deal. Any suggestions for aftermarket ECUs to work with existing EFI engine? I'd like to use my stock MAF injectors, port injection, tune port. I don't know which ones continue to use a MAF. At what horsepower level would you replace valves, or I guess exhausting canal, if at all? I wouldn't do that at a power level. I would do that at a heat generation level. So even at, like, let's say at Bonneville, where we were running a sustained load in RPM, or in a boat, or in an endurance racing application, even at 500 or 600 horsepower, or whatever, I might be tempted to do that. The answer is the oil pump and timing components are different from the 5.7 to the 6.4. The crank will set in the block. Won't work though. Okay. So there you go. Kenneth has the deets, man. Overkill for the sake of overkill is overkill. Yeah, I mean it's like a fuel pump. Okay, I want to make 1,000 horsepower. Okay, so you put 2 525s in it. Well, what if I run 7 525s? Yeah, you could still make 1,000 horsepower with that, but just there's no need to do that. I heard that anything past E60 makes the same power as E60. Might be something cool to test. I have seen that, Quinn. I have seen guys tell me that I'm certainly in agreement that the percentage gains would be there. There would be some level like E50 or the number that I thought was E50. That at an E50 that you had most of the power, and then going from there to 60, 70, 85, whatever, that the gains that you get just from that, not tuning or anything, that you get just from that are minimal. So, and I believe that, and I've never verified any of our E85 stuff from the pump. We just put it in and we run it and we run boost on it, and I'm not trying to make 1,000,000 horsepower anyways. Should I go to the flat top piston on LQ4 with rec ports and the 8720? I read that the chambers are large on those. They are. They're around 70 cc's. So they are big. They're like a 317, and you can put a flat top in there. Only showed up halfway through. Why would a crate motor LS3 be rated so much higher than the one that comes in a vehicle, including all our components, brands, and motors? Rob, the answer is that they don't, when they dyno test a crate motor, they do it the way I do it. They just run it on the engine dyno without all of the stuff hooked up. The crate motor from GM that's a factory LS3 is rated at the factory rating, and they do that the way that the factory motors are tested. That's with all of the stuff on it. That's the full exhaust, cats, everything, full accessories, full air intake, at temperature, factory tune. But these crate motors are not rated like that. That's why there's such a big difference. I'm getting the cheap Ford SCAT rods. I'll get DSS pistons, ARP heads, main studs. My main concern was breaking a rod when I sprayed in Mexico. Yeah. I don't see rods breaking. I see you hurting something because of detonation or some other mishap. But if you break a rod, you didn't break it because of strength. More interviews with Brian Tooley. I agree. That's a good thing. Do you have faith in 80 to 100 preload on LS7 lifters? I don't know what that comes out to be in turns. Like I said, I do it half a turn to 1.5 turns, and that's where we run it. I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head. I've never memorized that. I don't know what the fastener, the factory bolt down fastener. I don't know what the thread pitch is and how that equates to turns versus distance. Saturday, doing some 1/4 mile drags. Good. No coolant engine. Usually only do 1/8 drag. 85 is hard to find in the Pacific Northwest. Great addition to the low RPM build, the 85. Yeah, I would agree with that, BS. In Minnesota, you can get 110 octane at the pump. That's good. It just doesn't make as much power as the 85 does. The 85 is a gateway fuel. If you use it, you could end up in a race car. I still want to try methanol. I want to try M1. I also want to try M5. Ignacio 03 Silverado. Okay, I've got an O2. Mine's on a 6-liter. The ring gap Pro Charger 10 psi. How much spark plug gap? I like to run really low plug gap because it doesn't ever hurt you at all. It doesn't make more power with more plug gap. It makes less power if you have misfire. So I put plug gap on boosted stuff down at 19 or 20 thousandths. And thank you very much for your contribution. Unpopular opinion, too many tuners use E85 as a crutch. Well, if you're comparing that to 91, it's not a crutch. It makes a lot more power. No problem. The BS show. Let's see. I bought a Chinese sloppy stage 2. It came with lifters for $130. Also springs. Good luck with that. In order of the things that I would be concerned with, number one would be the lifters. If you've seen the Temu build, you see that guy's having trouble with his lifters. So the lifters would be the first thing I'd be concerned with. And then the springs. And sometimes we've taken the springs and measured the springs, and the springs were like at least close to what they're saying that they are. And then after we ran them for 5 minutes, they're no longer what they said that they are. They immediately go away. And then the last thing I would actually be worried about is the camshaft. The camshaft, I would check and make sure that all of the lobes are the same, that they're the same. And then I would check to make sure that the lobes are actually what like you bought a sloppy stage 2 cam. Do you have sloppy stage 2 specs? And then I would be concerned about the metallurgy of the cam and then the hardness depth and all that. There's a lot of things to be concerned with there. But maybe it all just worked out great. And if it did, that's fantastic because that's a good deal. Regarding helicoils, the goal is to strengthen the mains. The stock threads are definitely less than the ARP studs. You can stuff into it. Okay. My question is, okay, if the ARP studs are stronger than the threads are, my question is, do you think that that you're going to make so much cylinder pressure that you're pushing the crank out and you're going to rip the mains out? I would doubt that that's the case. But, that's all you. In Maine, you can get regular gas 91 octane without any ethanol. I use SCAT I-beam rods for my turbo 6-liter. I've read the same that E85 is the same as E50. Helicoil is made for a thread repair. Yep. It's basically one step above chicken wire. I have a Gen 4 5.3 board 20. Truck Norris cam, good. BTR springs, good. Trunnion upgrade. Also have a GT35 turbo. I'm going with 80-pound injectors with a fuel pump upgrade. How much power? Whatever that particular, I don't know what GT35 it is, but whatever that one will support, you have enough. If you have enough fuel pump, you have enough injector, I think, for probably that turbo. I just don't know which GT35 it is. My trick flow stage 1 cam, even with a pulled spark plug wire, isn't attracting enough attention at the stoplight. Through the turbo. Oh, okay, I see. You just take the turbo off so it makes more noise. If you just want the NA and the, you know, the Cars and Coffee cruise thing. It also has 799 heads. Okay. Yeah, none of that stuff matters. It just matters what that turbo is, because the turbo is going to be the thing that decides the power. I want to run M101. I want to run methanol, but don't have the pump for it. I have a 240 wheel horsepower pump, found out the hard way. Lost pressure. Uh-oh. You know what you can do? Well, there are ways to get around the pump issue. That's put bigger injectors in. And then that way you can run less fuel pressure, and then it makes it easier on the pump. But it should be pretty easy to get a different pump for it. How do you like the rods, Mason? He wants to know he's putting together this combination. Methanol makes even more power with 10% nitro. Yeah, that's what the M5 is. It's some percentage of nitromethane mixed in with it. And I kind of want to try that. Worried about heat treatment quality and cheap stuff wearing out. Lobes getting rounded. Yep. Methanol will spool a turbo faster, in my opinion. I'd like to know. Well, it will only do that if it makes more power. Yeah, Dan, your budget 917. I heard that the cams from China can be way off. I don't, not necessarily from China, but specific ones that, you know, if you buy a cam and it's like, you know, he bought cam and lifters and springs for $130, I would be a little concerned. The awesome part of a standalone with sequential capability, you can make the spark and fuel trim tables really weird to make a choppy idle. Yeah. About to run an F1A94 on my piston and rod LS3. We run blow through methanol combo. How much power do you think the block can handle? The block will handle more power than that blower will make. So that's not a problem. And if you have forged rods and forged pistons, the F1A94 is going to be like 1300 or something like that, I think. Can you set the preload on a Hemi as you did with an LS? No, because, well, yeah, you can, but it's a little more difficult because you have a shaft set up on a Hemi, so you can't do them individually. SCAT makes good stuff. Been around for a while. Yeah, I like them. A max speed GT35 T3 turbo. Yeah, you're not gonna make very much power with that. The hot side is going to be a problem with that. Regarding helicoils, good point. I don't know if the mains will be the weakest link. I don't, you know, I don't know that I've ever seen a crank get pushed out of the bottom of the block because the threads in the block weren't strong enough. I think it'd be more likely that you would break the bottom of the block if that happened. And that would be like maybe a hydrolock thing or backfire situation or something. Running 2200 injectors and a 340 pump. It had 25 psi fuel pressure at 18 psi. You're not making enough power to use all of a 340 liter per hour pump. You should be able to make that 250 wheel horsepower. You should be able to do that on a 255. So do you have a problem with fuel flow? Like, do you have a voltage problem, or do you have a filter problem or something? I'm running a 5.3 with a truck Norris cam, 122 blower. I'm going to change up my setup again for like the fourth time. Go to G42 and an iron 5.7. Okay. Holly makes a cheap pump for EFI 12-170 and 12-1600 are big enough for this crowd. Wow, he's throwing shade at crowds now. Beefy rods, radius crank, lots of oil, long piston skirts. Michael, you got to tell me how much power you want to make. The amount of power that you want to make is going to determine what the turbo is. Fuel lines or fuel rails too small. Yeah, that could be it, but that's not a lot of power for usually for, factory size fuel rails. Two bolt mains with ARP main bolts should be good. Run alcohol, and the M5 isn't worth a headache for no more power gain than it makes its minimum. And M5 is twice as corrosive. You have to totally disassemble the fuel system after each race. I should just use a 6-liter from the beginning, but here I am messing with a cheap 5.3. But if you want to make 1,000 horsepower, 1,000 horsepower 5.3 is really, really easy. I have pump flow spare at less than 800 horsepower crank with the Walbro 450 on gas. Yeah, I mean, that's for a 250 wheel horsepower 4-cylinder. That sort of pump is a lot. Gap rings on a 305 and push it to the max. Yes, you can do that. Michael, you want 600 horsepower? You should get the turbo that we will have available tomorrow or the next day. 340 is enough for 250 on methanol. I'll try it with 3/8 fuel lines. Oh, I didn't realize you're running methanol. Maybe that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking that this was E85. Methanol requires a lot of fuel. Yeah, we have a 3/8 fuel line that feeds the factory rail on the Trailblazer SS intake manifold that we run on the dyno, and we could make 1,000 horsepower with that. Anyone watching F1 practice? I am not. We've been here too long. Sorry, it's already too late. Should we do more interviews with car guys? 88% saying yes, so that's a win. We know that the 12 to 14% guys are, not going to do it. On that note, it is time to go, but I'll see you guys all later.